Hello, everyone, and welcome to our South by Southwest panel, Injecting Artists into High-Tech Startups Ecosystem. You're going to have a fantastic group today. We're going to be doing some introductions very shortly, but we're going to start out with Jordan asking a very important question.
Hey, since we're going to be talking about art today, I thought it would be fun if we just did a round of saying, when was the last time that we engaged in art? So, Rosemary, back to you.
Well, I engaged in art during the summer, which was really fun. Dancing to Glamour Kitty. It was a band out of the DC area that also was very fun to dance to, with masks, of course. And my mother painted this painting, which I believe is one of the most amazing paintings I've ever seen. But I also see art in financial modeling. I think that financial modeling is a bit of an art and a science. And then I also engage in art with, I'm wearing this particular jacket this evening. It was the first jacket I ever bought when I was at Goldman Sachs, working on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. So I see art in lots of different places and I enjoy it very much. Sherry, how about you?
Let's show the slide. Let me tell the story first. So my teenage kids and I decided to take this class where we were going to learn how to throw pottery. So there I was sitting with getting my hands wet, grabbing a lump of clay, spinning the wheel in mud, and everything is mud and goop is flying everywhere, all over me, all over the floor. And I was totally out of my element. I am not like a super messy person, but for my kids, this was their thing. And they felt as though they were inside of a YouTube satisfying video. And they thought it was so great. And it didn't matter if every time they touched something to bring their hands up to make something, that the whole thing exploded. And it reminded me of this image that was made in the mobile game that I'm going to be talking about today, where there's a slippery slope, right? And sometimes it's okay to be uncomfortable. And what I learned from my art experience is can't control everything all the time. And maybe it's okay if I just enjoy the process and don't worry so much about the product. So that was my latest art experience. And Jordan, how about you?
Cool, yeah. Well, kind of going back to Rosemary's idea of looking at the analytics of art and financial modeling. Probably honestly, the last time I interacted with art was just getting word out about CODAME and my own personal practice on social media. Being an artist these days requires so much things besides art, like all of the marketing stuff. So that was probably my last touch on art. But more excitingly, last year I did a project called Weekly Beats, where every week we made a beat, and it was just a collective of people that were all doing this. So last week I made 52 beats, and that was the thing that I was hyping last week. And then one more thing that I've been really into lately is non-fungible tokens and crypto art. And once you get into making these blockchain pieces of art that are like on chain, it's addictive. Like every day I want to have something on the chain that says I was here. So that's been really like grabbing my attention lately.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks.
So who are these fantastic people? So first I'd like to introduce Sherry Sobrato. Sherry Sobrato Bryson is a philanthropist, social entrepreneur, and the founder of the Digging Deep Project. She's on a mission to help young people develop emotional life skills through creative expression using tech products, including the free mobile game Shadow's Edge. Jordan Gray is the co-founder of CODAME, Art Plus Tech, a nonprofit sparking visionaries with playful workshops and an inclusive Art Plus Tech festival running since 2010. In the 1990s, he pioneered digital media with online music labels and scantilated Magna. Jordan leads technology, UX, strategy projects for the Fortune 500 companies whose clients have included Walmart, AT&T, Wells Fargo, Intel, and Google. And I am Rosemary Truman. I am my specialty is growth strategy. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm a startup catalyst. And most recently, before launching my companies, I was a corporate executive leading growth strategy and innovation strategy at IBM globally. At present, I'm the founder and CEO of the Center for Advancing Innovation, which is a catalyst for social impact startups. We've launched 300 companies in the last 6 years. I'm also the founder and CEO of Ignite Social Impact. The Ignite Social Impact is a platform, crowd equity platform to democratize impact investing for tech for good companies.
Right. Well, I thought it'd be great to start off by, there's so many different ways we can think about art and the interaction of art and high tech. So I thought it'd be helpful for each of us to share how we think about art. So let's start with you, Jordan. How do you think about art?
Yeah, I think that when we're talking about art, one of the things that often comes up is how, especially in a professional setting, how it differentiates from design. And for me, it's clear cut that art wants to be seen. It shouts, "Look at me." And design wants to be invisible and tries to hide itself. When design is good, you don't see it. When art is good, everybody sees it. So in the professional settings, I think that that's one important distinction to make between functional design and functional art and what they're trying to do. I think that another really important thing that comes to mind with art is just that creativity is an inherent life force. Without an impetus to create, we wouldn't have life. So creativity in art is something that's in all of us. And I'm pretty adamant about that. I'm an advocate of the amateur. I love when people who don't consider themselves artists just create something, get out of their comfort zone. And I think that that's also really important in kind of getting people out of their echo chambers. If people are comfortable talking about things that they're not sure about or that is unfamiliar to them, kind of the spaces that art takes us to, it's going to help with civic dialogue. So I think that art is really important in that regard as well. Yeah. Rosemary, what do you think?
Well, I always think about what I like to observe what others believe as well. But in the past, you could think of Leonardo da Vinci. You know, I think about the famous artist, and he thinks about art as communication. And Tolstoy about expression and experience, you know, reflecting on who you really are. And Picasso actually believes it was a lie to allow us to see the truth. So I think, you know, in what we have done with artists, injecting artists into startups through our challenges, we know that artists are problem solvers. They provoke creativity, they fill the holes, they change the boundaries, they ask questions that people maybe don't want to answer because they haven't even thought of the question. They articulate what others can't see, and they make the invisible visible. And I believe that art expands the landscape. It moves it forward into the unknown, and it makes the unimaginable but sensed imaginable. Sherry, what are your thoughts?
So when I think about art, I think about the emotional reaction that we have to art. Maybe when viewing a piece of art, you know, maybe that's provokes something in us, a memory, or we're moved from one emotional state that we were in before we look at the art to kind of where we're at after we look at the art. And we can learn something about the artists themselves. You know, what were they thinking? What was their emotional state when they created that piece? Or we can imagine that. But if we stop for a second and think about what is our emotional reaction, we can learn something about ourselves. We can see something of our inner world, maybe that we hadn't seen before. In a way, art can be that mirror for us. And when I was thinking about what is an artist really doing when they create art, it's that they're externalizing something that's inside of them. They're making, like what you said, Rosemary, the invisible visible. So they're taking something that's inside of them, which we normally wouldn't see, and putting it out there and making it visible. And if it's visible, we can reflect on it. And if we reflect on it, we can learn something new about ourselves or see a possibility that we hadn't seen before. So art, I feel, is very important. This is a quote that I had from the Anderson Ranch Art Center here in Colorado. And it really talks about how artists can use to help us process and understand the world around us. I mean, think about it. When kids start creating art, that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to understand their world around us. But instead of just seeing art as something that we can help us understand our external reality, I really feel art can be something that can help us understand our own selves, our own internal reality too.
So cool. Yeah. I love the theme of wayfinding that kind of wove in between all of our answers. It's a really strong theme. And yeah, certainly when it comes to self-discovery and discovery of the world, it's there. And in some ways, that's what high tech is about too. It's putting new things out into the world. And when we combine these things, there's so much opportunity. So wanted to touch on how are we combining art and tech? How is that actually happening? And Rosemary, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, this is an interesting story. So the Center for Advanced Innovation is called the Tinder for Startups. That's one of our nicknames. We have some other ones too. So we're basically a startup factory. And the backdrop behind the Center for Advanced Innovation is that every year in the US, we spend about $140 to $160 billion with R&D to universities, to hospitals, et cetera. And we have about $7 trillion worth of intellectual property sitting on the shelf. And this intellectual property could truly change the world. So what the Center for Advancing Innovation does is it's kind of a trifecta. We start with these inventions sitting on the shelf, we match them with entrepreneurs, and then create startups, and then we launch them, we match the startups with capital. So it's the invention, the talent, and then the capital. So we work with about 170,000 inventions across about 123 research institutes. We evaluate them for commercial viability. We launch a global challenge. Then teams are competing for the privilege of launching a company around the invention, and we train the teams, and then we generate startups. So what does this have to do with injecting artists into startups, into high-tech startups? Well, in the past, we had everything was pretty much organic in terms of when we launched our challenges. We're our 9th challenge. As I mentioned, we've launched more than 300 startups. But in partnership with the Walton family, we launched a challenge called SCALE, which stands for Supply Chain and Logistics Enterprises. And Alice Walton was the one who was adamant, wanted to do this challenge. And what was really important to her was to have artists participating on every single team. So literally, we injected artists systematically into high-tech companies. And we had a tremendous impact. So the answer to the question about how we do it is we did it very systematically. We created a new process and methodology, a new bunch of training, the challenge strategically. When we recruited people, we recruited our artists differently. It was basically me having to talk to the artists and convince them they should be part of a high-tech startup, which is really interesting because many of them felt that they had no value to add, which was odd. And so we would, identify the inventions, teams would come in, sign a letter of intent, we'd go through the elevator speech phase, business plan phase, and then we had the winning teams at the end. We had the best startups we've ever produced out of the SCALE challenge. And again, it stands for Supply Chain and Logistics Enterprises. We collected a lot of data as well out of it. We actually have about 100% success rate from the startups that came out of that challenge, which is very unusual because 90% of the time startups fail within 1 year. So Sherry, what about you?
Well, great. Thanks for asking. Our group has created a free mobile game called Shadow's Edge. And it's a game that young people play, teens and young adults, and it moves them through the emotional stages, which you can see here pictured, so that they can learn about themselves, develop social emotional skills in addressing the challenges that they're facing, And what they do in the game is expressive writing, which is one form of artistic expression, and then creating art. But art in our game is graffiti. And we included graffiti as a metaphor because many of these young people that are facing their challenges today hold things inside. They don't want to tell people. They don't want to reach out because of the stigma attached with reaching out. And so a lot of their needs, emotional needs, get left unmet. And everybody, we know that everybody's dealing with somebody. So we combined art and technology by making it a technical tool. There's no stigma to actually go somebody or even talk to somebody, yet they can still go through the same process. They can still move from what these pictures show, relatively disrupted state where everything seems to be going wrong, turned upside down, surreal if you would be, and through kind of that difficult period of what we call disillusionment, when nothing seems to be working anymore as we try to face our challenges. The coping skills that we had earlier in life just flat out don't work anymore. And although sometimes the challenges we go through in life can help us be that different or even better version of ourselves, you don't see that in the beginning, that's for sure. You don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. But in our game, we replicate that stage of growing through challenge as the discovery stage of in our game. So how we marry art and technology is our game includes those forms of artistic expression, but it's in a tech product, which means it's very readily accessible and it's free to the young people that use it. And it's been a great combination for us. And Jordan, I'm curious, could you tell us a little bit about how you're marrying art and technology?
Yeah, well, first I wanted to say that the game is so cool, and it even touches on games as art, which I think that they really are. But for myself and for CODAME, I mean, it's in our name, CODAME Art and Tech, that we combine these things. And it's a nonprofit, and it's been running for 10 years. We've been doing it now. And the things that we do as programming include workshops where people just build things together. Our kind of trifecta or pillars of those are connecting with each other and connecting new pathways in your brain, actually creating something. We have breakout rooms where everybody actually makes stuff. And then celebration. The celebration is really important to us. And that includes building virtual galleries these days. In the old days, it was more nightlife events where we could have things on the walls and walk around and talk about them. And then some of the other things that we do are supporting artists with sales and marketing. It's something that takes up so much time when you're an artist, and you really have to have it turned on. So any way that we can support our artists in that way is great. And it's kind of a band effect. Like if you're in a band, each person has a group of friends and they bring them all, and then you have a whole room full of energy because of that. If you're a singular artist, you don't really have that going on. So something like group shows or being part of a collective like CODAME gives us all an opportunity to amplify what we're doing and hold each other up. And some of the other stuff that we do for like businesses and more of our corporate partners, we'll do team building, like bringing the workshops and even play shops where you don't have to come and want to be like improving yourself or building skills, but just being expressive and creating something together. We'll do those as team building and for celebrations like holiday parties and things like that. And then one last thing I wanted to touch on with how we're doing these combinations is that it's intentionally inclusive. For us, we don't want to appeal to just people that are already artists or people that are already technologists. We want to give anybody an opportunity to see that they're creative and that technology is just another tool. It's a brush and you can use it to be creative and to tell any story. So those are things that we really focus on. And the inclusivity also plays into our programming where we have a weekly meeting. New volunteers can show up and that's how we decide what we're going to do, is when somebody has the interest and the energy and is willing to lead a project. We started doing monthly critiques that way. We have Ari running critiques for artists. We're starting a Clubhouse series of talks that Lynette started. And now all of our workshops, we have kind of our outline for them, but it takes somebody new coming in with an idea of something they want to teach or want to TA, and finding somebody to teach it. But that's how we come up with like the topics for our workshops and things, is really like listening to the community and having them come in and enabling them and giving them the tools to make all of our programming happen. So yeah, inclusivity. Yeah, that's all out of me on that.
So Sherry and Jordan, you guys have gone above and beyond to combine art and high tech. Sherry, what made you want to combine art and high tech?
Or as someone working directly counseling kids and families doing physical art, I saw the power in how much art connects us to ourselves, but also to other people. When we explain our art or show our art to somebody else, that provides a connection that we wouldn't have had before. So I was already convinced of the power of art, but I quickly learned that there's one of me, and leading support groups kind of one by one, I wasn't going to be able to reach as many people. And so the tech side of things is how we amplify this power of voice, the voice that art gives, to a greater audience. And we can connect people that would never be able to connect on that sort of feelings level with each other. And it's a little hard to explain without showing you what I mean. So inside of our game, not only can kids make a bunch of graffiti and express what's going on for them, they can, of course, look through the game and go back and review in their journal, by seeing all the art on the walls, their process of how they're developing and going through a certain challenge. But beyond that, we also use art and technology. We combine the two to build community. For example, when I was working with kids directly, one of the biggest challenges that I heard for young people was, I want to know somebody that's just like me, that has the exact same problem, that's the exact same age, that lives in the same area, and on and on. And it was so frustrating to me as somebody guiding them through this process to say, it's hard. You're not going to meet that person. And what I realized in going through my own emotional healing process is that we don't have to find somebody exactly like that's experienced exactly what we have, or even has the same struggle that we have, because we can connect with many more people if we connect with them on an emotional level. And if through our emotions, we can join with somebody and they thereby feel less alone because somebody understands how we feel. And that's what I really feel is the potential of combining art and high tech, when you are able to do that. So we're going to take a look at some of the images that we have inside of our game, what we call shadowgram. And shadowgram, if you can imagine it, it's like an internal Instagram where the players in the game can see the graffiti that other players have chosen to post. So maybe not all their graffiti, maybe just a tiny portion of one of their graffitis they made. So I just want to show you the power of what I feel comes out of connecting art and high tech. So we're just going to flip through these. This is one kid that made. I'm going to go ahead and read the captions because they're hard to read. And it's the player says, my worst habit is insulting myself whenever I feel depressed. And how many of us can relate to that? Here's another just fun, very graffiti-ish piece without a caption. Next, please. And this is another one. What hate that people do to me sometimes. Bet you we've all felt that. Cherished memory of mine, no filter version. We teach in our game that, hey, this is your place. Don't filter stuff, just pour it out there. And here one of our players actually put no filter version. Next, please. Here's another image a young person made. The ghost that I hide behind so people don't see the real me. I think we can all relate to that one. Next. Sometimes we have to loosen up. Playful, fun image. And next. Is it a child with a chronic illness? My illness is really invisible, but if you look closely enough, you can see how it's changed my life. I mean, these are all powerful messages they're creating in the game. And sometimes they just make really cool art. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. And this says it takes courage to notice how tough our inner dialogue can be. Step one, to inner kindness. I think we could all learn from that, to lighten up on our own internal dialogue. And who are you without your mask? Another very powerful young image a young person made on one of the billboards in our game. But there's hundreds of places in Shadow's Edge where young players can post what they're thinking, and then other young players within the game can come up and respond by giving them positive messages like "hang in there," or "I've been there, done that," or "you inspire me." So I think when art and tech can be combined in a product that actually helps people emotionally, that can be really powerful. And I'm just going to show you one last slide here.
I have to tell you something. I just love this one. I mean, there's so many things you can read into this one, with the red face and the pink lips and the eyes with no eyeballs, right? And I mean, there's so many messages this particular piece of graffiti has. I mean, talk about interacting with art.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just going to say. That what you were just shared, Rosemary, was perfect, and that you were having an emotional reaction and you're reading into art. And I think that's what happens, right? And then if you were to say something back, you know, amongst our choices that we allow, you know, to that young person that created the art, that person can feel heard and understood. And too often, I think people are left alone in their feelings. And if tech and combining art and tech could help people feel less alone, I mean, that's amazing. And if you just flip back to the slide you were just showing. So if we wanted to look at the impact that gameplay had on the young people that were playing it, and I'm not going to go through all this, but this is the kind of response that we're seeing. And to me, that's very powerful. I think that tech and youth gets bad rap because they're on their phones like constantly. But what if they were on their phone and playing something that actually was helping them? And that's why I think combining tech and art is important. And then Jordan, do you want to share?
Yeah, it's so cool seeing that the connection. I 100% agree that the humanities behind technology, or humanities being injected in technology, are really the importance here. We were talking about wayfinding earlier, and I think that we've had kind of a long time, or a good amount of time, with Web 2 technologies kind of living in a bubble, not just a financial bubble, but kind of anything that comes out of technology is cool, and it gets away with being whatever it is. But then recently we've been starting to see some real humanitarian issues being raised about the ethics of AI and the biases that are programmed into it, about environmental and cultural impact. And these are the right questions to be asking, because technology has so much power to do good in the world. And we can't just be reaching for technology to do simply nifty things. Although simply nifty things are fun and interesting, that can't be the only thing that we're doing with technology. And I don't think that art and the humanities are asking for only nifty, shiny things out of technology. So nothing happens in a bubble. That's true of technology, and that's true of art as well. If a piece of art didn't pull from any other context or culture before it, it would basically be meaningless. Inference is the only thing that allows Rosemary to look at that piece of graffiti and feel something, because she's seen other similar images or other things that impact her understanding of it. So nothing happens in a bubble. And when we look at combining the humanitarian studies, ethics studies, things like that, with technology, it's going to only make technology better and make its impact on the world even more meaningful. And that's why I see it as being really important to combine these things. How about you, Rosemary?
Well, I'm going to boil it down to the challenge model that I mentioned with the scale challenge. So what was really impactful to me is to see these startups be extraordinarily successful out of this challenge, where we literally had fantastic artists on each team, on all the teams. The teams that won the challenge were the ones that had startups embedded into the startup, meaning they're not just an advisor and hang around just for 1 hour a month. They're actually part of the team. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned before, 90% of the startups fail within a year. Pitches are really rough around the edges, and so we have to go through many, we call them hot seats, you know? So many hot seats, because we're putting these startups in front of investors at this investor forum. So they're going to be raising money. And lots of times there is really no comprehensive team. And what I mean by that is a team that, if it's a technical startup, it could be engineering, or it could be scientific in nature. And we strive to make all of our startups multidisciplinary. And in fact, they don't get to the end and win unless they are multidisciplinary. But generally speaking, startups don't have multidisciplinary comprehensive teams. And so what we found was, through our scale challenge, where we literally injected artists into high-tech companies, is we have 100% still running. So it's 2 years, so 90% of them should have failed. We had, in our investor forum, some of the most influential investors that came to the investor forum. They were writing me notes during the forum and saying, "We've never seen like 100% of the pitches so good." I mean, so that's more qualitative in nature, but these guys see thousands of pitches a year, and not only do they have a kind of a comprehensive team, but they're attracting world-class talent. I mean, what we tell our startups is that they should never, ever fear of asking the very best people in the whole world. You know, whoever you want on your team, ask them. There's no reason not to. And I think these artists helped the teams become more fearless. And so I said, just go after it. They can only say no, right? So we had these incredible teams. So I think from my perspective, the why is, you have new startups making a social impact in the world, and with high commercial viability, and they're solving some significant problems. So that's why I think it's important to do, but it's not very easy.
Yeah, so when it's not so easy, what kind of challenges have we run into? I think that we'll all have some stories here, but Sherry, do you want to take us away?
Sure. So I think that it's pretty obvious that resilience and developing one's identity, or learning important social emotional skills, and all the different things that a young person playing Shadows Edge can gain from the game is an amazing thing, but they have to play. They have to keep playing. We know from our research that the maximum benefit to the players is when they keep playing. Just like you don't go see a therapist once and it solves all your problems. You know, it's the consistency of that, going back again and again and reflecting, that's important. So our biggest challenge has been retention. And although we feel that we have a tool that can really help young people through the challenges in their life and help them with those emotional skills, like every game out there, you know, on the market, we show the same trend. You know, they play a lot the first week and then slowly drop off. And so we're working on many different ways to resolve that. And luckily, you know, we have other content that we publish digitally that's not just the game. So we wrap the game around in a social media community for the young people. We also present stories that are motivating to young people, other stories of challenges that kids have gone through in their own words that they write themselves on our blog on the shadowsedge.com site. And So we're trying to meet the challenges of combining, this healing modality with, the art and the tech. But that's been our biggest challenge is people have to play like anything else. They have to do the work if they're going to see the benefits. I'm curious how it's been for you, Rosemary.
It was really interesting. So I never thought, like in my career, I was doing major growth strategies and transformations for the Fortune 100s, right? So I never really thought that I was going to become a matchmaker. I really have become a matchmaker. The Tinder for startups is fitting, right? But what I learned, it was really interesting. These really amazing, incredible artists that have so much to offer. So in reality, they had on this chart, they had very high means and power with their art. They had very, very high. And they also had very high empathy. They all did. However, they didn't believe it. So they were down in this quadrant, even though the truth of the matter, they're in this quadrant. So in order to have these artists participate in these high-tech startups, I had to convince them of all of the different value propositions they were adding, but they just didn't have any idea that they could contribute. As at the beginning of this session, I mentioned, expanding boundaries, solving problems, seeing things that others can't see. It's incredible what artists could add, but I had to, literally convince each one in a meeting, and sometimes multiple meetings. So I think that artists should recognize their value more. And that was the challenge that I had personally with injecting artists into high-tech startups. How about you, Jordan?
Yeah, I really hear that. And I think that there's some nuance too about assumptions going into conversations like this about the value being provided is even framed in what is valuable to technology, what is valuable to businesses. And I think that there's also an interesting question of what can businesses and what can technology do for the arts and contribute to culture and things like that. And I think that that is one of the challenges, is just thinking about the framing and getting over those initial assumptions that people have about what art is and what technology is and how they fit together. And whether it is art or technology on any project, one of the classic things that you have to balance is the balancing act of time and money and quality. And that's absolutely true in the arts. It's absolutely true in technology. And that's the two can inform each other. And the arts and having a humanitarian focus can help you tease out what is of value in any situation. So I think that it'll help. Having an artistic background helps with making decisions around those classic three corners of the triangle. And I think another big challenge is just personally running this art and tech organization over the last 10 years and bringing it to many corporations and businesses is the need for advocacy. Nobody is going to default into bringing in artists and bringing in fun and play or anything like that in a business setting. That's just not the default. And that goes for any kind of programming too, not just the arts, but things tend towards entropy. If nobody's pushing for it, then it's not going to happen. So what we have found to be super valuable is just advocacy, having somebody that understands that inherent two-way street of value between art and technology, and having them be the ones that are asking their managers for the right kind of workshops to actually engage a team in a way that's meaningful to them, kind of like how the kids are engaging with the graffiti application. it's so easy to try and force some team building on somebody, and it just feels so cheesy. But if it's coming from the people that are actually going to be doing it, and it's things that they care about, it really sets up everybody to feel like they're leaders and pushing in the space. So advocacy and energy that it takes to do that advocacy has been kind of one of the challenges. Arming people to be advocates and letting them know how important it is has been one of the challenges.
So Jordan, what do you think the future of injecting startups into, what do you think the future of combining art and high tech is? And I'd like you to expand a little bit more on your remarks around combining humanitarian issues with high tech, because I think it would be great if you could just expand upon that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that maybe one example from a couple years ago even was when there was a company, a startup that had decided that the thing to do was like, I think it was groceries on demand, or like a vending machine that would basically replace a bodega. And the backlash out of New York of people that were like, the bodega is my home, was just showing that people don't want a vending machine to get all their things from. They want some human interaction. And that's just one example of many where the context, again, is what is really important. When you're solving problems, it's very easy to have a hammer and see everything as a nail. But if you think of technology just not as like the latest shiny thing that can solve problems or something to get excited about, but really asking yourself first, what are the world's biggest problems? What do we need to put our energy into to like bring the whole human race up and to have us survive into the next 1,000 years? Those are the important questions to be asking. And kind of along those lines, there's a lot of growth hackers and managers that'll talk about like the next billion users. I'm really curious about the next billion artists. How are we going to help everybody realize that the arts and humanitarian values are that important? That those are the things that will actually save us in the end, that is the most valuable thing. So that's one of the things that's been on my mind as far as like the future goes, is thinking about these next billion artists and how to activate them. And I see it tangibly a lot in the CODAME workshops that we do and the play shops, where we see people having that spark, that realization, getting excited about it, actually creating things. So I think that's a great place for us to continue to be putting energy. And it's actually something that kind of mirrors what I see with my parents who are retired. That's what they do when we're talking about the future of work too. Pretty soon AI will be able to make important decisions for us. We don't have to make decisions anymore. So we'll have an interesting shift of value when the next revolution comes as far as the nature of work goes. And I think that artistry and that kind of value system is going to be of even greater value than we see it being today. And then one last point to touch on regarding the future of art and high tech is the idea of decentralization and decentralized autonomous organizations. This is something that's from the blockchain space, but it's something that I was introduced to through a group of artists who weren't thinking too much about like minting NFTs or focusing on making money as the primary goal, but they were thinking about the invisible economy and running their collective as an autonomous organization, and how that governance can be coded and how it can enable more people to participate when there's these structures set up in code that kind of take care of a lot of the overhead of litigation and things like that. So now there's smart contracts for actually starting a business is one crazy thing. So that's the kind of like future stuff I'm excited about right now.
Jordan, I mean, that's very, very aligned with where we are right now. I mean, my companies run virtually. And pretty much my whole, since Goldman Sachs till now, I've been traveling almost 100% of the time until COVID hit, you know. But
yeah,
I mean,
decentralized.
Generally a federated model with companies. Companies are like, we don't need real estate anymore. So it hits home in many more ways than one.
Cool. Thank you. Sherry, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So for our project, it's really that combining that artistic self-expression with technology that's going to help us, we feel that treatment gap between the kids that need help and the kids that are receiving it. If we make it easily accessible and free and just out there for kids to want to learn those kind of self-development skills, those life skills, the potential of what it can provide in terms of keeping people happier and healthier and not being pushed towards that end. When you think of how tough it is to be a teen today compared, you know, to when I was growing up, I mean, we didn't have school shootings and COVID and political issues and storming the White House and all these things that the kids have witnessed, my teens have witnessed just in the last year. That all affects their mental health. And if we, you know, what I see the future is if tech products can get to these kids and teach them some of the skills before they get to that crisis stage, to me, that's hope. And so combining art and tech, to me, represents hope. And then just kind of on the tech side of things, I'm not a super technical person, but it's all the data that you can collect. So we can learn from each and every kid that plays our game. How do they move through Shadow's Edge? What are we learning from them? What do they resonate with? What do they not? We can engage young people also in focus groups and learn from them. We can encourage other people to develop tech products that are in this sort of wellness space. So the future to me is everything that's going to happen, you know, after our game. And we hope to inspire that. And we're committed to doing research to show that this way of reaching kids is a way that's effective for them. And, you know, who knows, maybe we'll even discover it can be as effective, if not more effective for this age group than maybe a one-on-one or individual or group work with them. So that's what the future promises for our project. And Rosemary, did you have anything additional you'd like to say?
Yeah, I would say that I see the future of combining art and high tech systematic. I mean, and every startup we are launching in the future, we're going to be marrying the two together to make sure that we have this a different spirit, if you will, engaged. And I think that, you know, we're working on a couple of fund models right now, and those are going to be part of the foundation for how we're thinking about the fund model, in addition to social impact. So I completely agree with what you all have mentioned about, you know, seeing the future as having the art as a purposeful model, if you will. And it could be decentralized as well. So it doesn't mean that the artist actually has to be in the same location. I mean, some of our startups have been in 3 different continents, and that you can still connect through art in different, and high tech in different geographic regions.
Thanks. So now that we've, you know, come together to understand the importance of, like you said, injecting these artists into the high tech startup ecosystem, I'm wondering what we can all do next to make this a reality. Rosemary, Jordan, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I guess I would say just systematically engage artists in the process, and artists, thinking about artists broadly speaking. You know, there are, I mean, the reason I told you about this jacket, but I could not believe this guy produced this jacket. I had never seen anything like it. But there are artists everywhere we look, and there's artists within us as well. But engaging them and being purposeful about it, going back to what you were talking about, Jordan, and having advocates to make sure that we are engaging artists in the future. You know, we've heard about STEM, and now there's STEAM, and STEAM has the A in it for artists. So really, we should be thinking about the STEAM startup ecosystem versus the STEM artist ecosystem, just on an ongoing basis. How about Jordan? What do you think?
I love that, and of course, having advocacy as a pain point for myself, I think one of the ways to get to that point, if you don't already feel like it's something that you should be advocating for, is, or even if it is, just to live a daily practice of art. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but taking some amount of time of every day just for yourself to express, even if it is just to yourself. In it could be as small as just like every day looking up at the sky and seeing a cloud or not, or the sky and just like dreaming and thinking that's my art today. Is every day I will look at the sky once. And having a daily practice has shown that it really helps with the creative juices. Creativity loves constraint. It might hate deadlines, but it loves constraint. And having some kind of daily practice like that is really powerful. So find something that works for you, whether it's making filters on photos or doing a doodle or even taking a picture or whatever it is. Just find something that you can do on a daily way to bring the arts into your own life. And by helping yourself in that way, you can then begin to help others with advocacy, because you'll be speaking from a really true and honest place about the impact that art has had in your life. So that would be my call to action, is think about a daily practice that you can pick up and carry with you.
I really like that, Jordan. And I would say that similarly, I was going to say that we can all think like artists. We may not be able to create that perfect piece of art that we have in our mind that we want to produce, but we all have that potential to start small, like the steps like you were describing, Jordan, and to start thinking like artists. And if I had something to leave with everyone, I would like to encourage everyone to take that risk, to express themselves, to look for that new perspective in their thoughts or creativity, and to see the possibilities maybe that you haven't seen before, and to share your insight and perspective with others. Because if you put yourself out there, that's why we chose graffiti as our metaphor of our game. Too many things are left inside, but you can't expect people to connect with you unless you put yourself out there first and give people something to connect to. And I think if everyone started being that way, living their authentic self, like you were saying, Jordan, then it would be much easier to connect with people. And wouldn't that be a really cool place? I mean, I think of, my whole project started right after my husband went to Burning Man for the first time. And when I started thinking about what is really Burning Man, it's people connecting through their art and their expressiveness. And that's when I decided that's it. That's what we have to make Shadow's Edge about, is connecting through art, because an expression, whether that's written expression or verbal expression. And I think we can all be our most expressive selves, and I think some great things would come out of it.
I think about, I bought this painting that I really liked at this yard sale for $20. And my mom loves this painting. She like dissects it in so many different ways every time she looks at it. So I love talking to her about this painting. This woman, you can't see her eyes. She's got this, I should have put a picture in this deck about it, but yeah, you can really connect through art in lots of different ways. Well, I just want to thank you, Sherry and Jordan, for your time today. You have shared some incredible insights. And I wanted to just kind of wrap up some of the key thinking points that I think we went over today, and I'd invite you to add. But I'll start with creativity and art is in all of us. It makes the invisible visible, moves us emotionally. Art can help us understand ourselves, that you mentioned, Sherry. How can we combine art? We can combine art with like a systematic approach, games as art, which you mentioned, Jordan. But it can be also very opportunistic. So there's a myriad of ways to combine art and high tech. And I loved the quote that you had, Jordan, about tech could be a brush as well. And Sherry, you mentioned, combining art with the mobile app builds resilience and creates a healing modality, which is fantastic. And Jordan, you mentioned that there's a lot of value provided to artists, providing value to technologists, and vice versa. And there's a need for advocacy. You need to have someone who understands the value of art. In the future, we could have kind of a federated, decentralized, systematic approach. And, to wrap up kind of our call to action, I mentioned engage artists in the process. Jordan, have a daily practice of looking at the art. And we can all think of ourselves as artists. Here you mentioned, share your insights with others, give people something to connect to. And I love the part about, when your husband came home from Burning Man, you started your project and because you're connecting through art. And you both mentioned we can all be our most expressive selves. So I just wanted to mention those items as takeaways, which I think were extremely valuable. So again, I thank you for your time today and for sharing those insights with the South by Southwest awesome audience.
Thank you, audience, for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks to both of you. Really fun.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.